let's talk about when you went on deployment now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's 2004 is when you deploy, like the summer of 2004?
Yeah.
And where do you guys deploy to?
So our primary AO was the Sunni Triangle of Iraq. Mm-hmm. Beautiful, beautiful place.
Yeah.
We landed in Kuwait. We were only in Kuwait. I think they called it Camp Victory, maybe. I can't remember the name of it. It was before the Pizza Huts and Subways and all that. I know that for a fact. But we land in Kuwait. We're only there for a couple days, and we get on the bird, and I'll never forget this. We were on the tarmac in Kuwait getting ready to fly over Al-Assad. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I think we were on the first 3 C-130s we got on. We had to get off of because they weren't mechanically sound or whatever, or just Gunny just felt like screwing with us. Who knows? But we had to get off of them. But it wasn't Gunny because I remember the 4th one, and we're all sweating our asses off.
Yeah, it's August.
It's miserable.
Yeah,
miserable. And I remember the 4th one. I don't know if it was the crew chief, the load master, whoever, but Gunny took someone somewhere, and I'm pretty sure it was a conversation pretty much like, if this bird doesn't take off, you're not going to go home alive anyway. Because it sucked. I mean, we have everything on.
Yeah.
You know, and we're frontline Marines, so we're geared out. And with stuff we'll never use, ever. But it was on the gear list.
Yeah, gotta have it.
Yeah. And so we ended up landing in Al-Assad, and I remember when we got off the bird in Al-Assad, and I thought to myself, man, 29 pounds wasn't that bad. Wasn't that bad.
Yeah. Al-Assad will do that to you.
I miss it already, you know? And so we get off and we go to our tent where we're sleeping with our bunk beds, and we start the brief the next day. And I remember we were.
So is that where you guys were going to be working out of? Were you guys actually going to be stationed at Al-Assad primarily?
Yeah, but I mean, rarely got to stay on
That's
Al-Assad.
where your headquarters were?
Yeah, that's where battalion was.
Okay.
Yeah. And so we start the 48-hour brief, and we're in the middle of that, and captain walks in. We were in one of the hangars, and you had a look on his face that, you know, something wasn't good, obviously. And it was because during the left seat, right seat of the unit we were replacing got hit. And they lost, I don't want to misquote it, but one of the guys I was just with this past weekend was there in that unit. We replaced 2-7. And it was, they had lost like an XO, a first sergeant. Like, it was bad. Mm-hmm.
That's from one, was it an IED strike?
It was IED with after action. And so, I mean, it was just a bad situation.
What's after action?
So they took fire, and it was not like, it wasn't an isolated event. They
hit IED goes, and then
they fight through.
Then you're getting hit with RPGs and some shit on fire.
Yeah. It was a gnarly situation they shouldn't have been in, because it happened in a place that was, you know, friendly. And at the time, actually, when we were over there, I think we still call them roadside bombs. I don't even think we called them IEDs yet. I don't think we utilized that terminology yet, if I'm not mistaken. Again, I could be wrong. It's happened before. But we hear this, and it hits us like, we're like, oh, shit, that's not good. That stuff's not supposed to happen. And so that was another big awakening moment, right? But we get ready to leave, and at this time I'm a machine gun team leader. Little did I know I'd become leader of the React team, same as QRF, Quick Reaction Force. And so we have like this 16 vehicle convoy or something, which would be a huge no nowadays. And I remember the sir walked by and he was like, "Hey, Schick, we need someone to man that pig on the lead vehicle." get behind the 240 on the lead vehicle, and I was like, who's going to jump on that pig? And we were just in briefs hearing about guide wires. They'd put guide wires across the road, trying to decapitate gunners. And it was,
so I had left my first deployment in, I want to say, April or May of 2004. So
this is, right before.
Yeah. So, and I was just trying to think if we were using the term ID, and I'm almost positive we were, because I remember.
Yeah, but you guys are special.
Yeah, no, I know, but I was trying to think. I remember, like, I'm actually envisioning a slide. We caught an IED maker, and we had all this, like, he had wires, and he had like clocks, like multiple clocks from timers, like kitchen timers, and so he had wires, kitchen timers, all this stuff, and they're like, "Hey, this guy you caught, he's an innocent guy," and I was like, "Well, no." And they say, "Well, no, he's innocent. What evidence do you have?" And I brought these pictures, and I'm like, "Look at the stuff that we took off this target. It's all IED stuff." And they were like, "Oh, okay." But it was kind of first starting to assemble the idea that people were building these improvised explosive devices.
Okay.
So I think we were using it, but you're right, it might not have spread to the Marine Corps yet at this point.
We're kind of slow, but we're deadly. But it's, I don't. We might have. It was a long time ago. It's irrelevant, but because roadside bombs, that wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
So let's call it an IED.
Well, if you don't have an
don't church
for
it up. Don't church it up. But we're out there. We have our convoy, and so I asked the guys, like, "Hey, who's gonna go man that pig?" And it's crickets. I was like, "Oh, very well. I got it." I looked down, I was like, "Hey, sir, I got it. I'm going to do it." And then, of course, like, no, okay. No, I'm like, "No. F you.
For sure.
When I die, just remember what your letter needs to say. It's because you were a JJ." And with a lot more colorful language. But I jumped up there, man, and it was, look, pucker factor pegged. Pegged. Because I'm like, how do you see a guide wire? Like, can you see the guide wire? Does the sun have to be hit in a certain way? Like, what am I looking for?
And did you have armored Humvees?
No, most of them weren't.
Yeah, and did the
most of them were 2-door soft tops.
Yeah, get some. That's what we had. The turret just.
So we were in a 6-ton, and the lead vehicle was a 6-ton.
Oh, that's better. That's more comfortable. I mean, I'd rather be in that than a Humvee. If I'm in the lead vehicle,
I would rather be in a Harrier. But it was, that's why you signed up for infantry. Get some. That's right. Yeah. And we hated, and the pilots. It was like they're a bunch of prima donnas, and we would see them come in and land, and go to their air conditioned cans, and they were like, they're eating steak and shrimp, and they're all comfortable, and they're on their sleep number bed. It's like, you make all this stuff up in your head.
Dude, I'll tell you what, you make that up in your head. We had a World War II pilot on here, Jim Kunkel, and he was literally saying, like, hey, the war in Europe, for me, he was a P-38 pilot. He's like, my missions were like 45 minutes. He's like, then I was back at base. Now, of course, those 45 minutes were pretty sketchy. He ended up getting shot down, but a lot of missions that he did is exactly what you said. That's the reality of being a pilot. That's the reality of it.
Yeah, it's and then, but until you need them.
Oh God, yeah. Well, yeah, of course.
And then the first time that happens, you're like, "Oh, I get it.
Oh yeah,
we need those guys."
Yeah, for sure.
But it's interesting because as a line guy, as a grunt, I mean, you're trained from day one. Every other job in the United States military is to support you.
Yeah, that's true.
You're trained that, which I'm not. I won't say if I agree or disagree with it now, because it's like I tell civilians, like, look, think of the military as a giant wheel with a lot of spokes. Combat guys are like a super small portion of one spoke.
Yeah,
it takes a lot of moving parts to make this machine turn.
That's true.
And so it's whether it's in support, like, listen, I'm over that. I don't need that anymore. Like, I understand why guys think that. I understand the mindset.
There's a great. I was listening to some Hackworth talking, Colonel David Hackworth, and one of the things that he said, He was trying to explain how many people were in combat in Vietnam, and it was like 10% of the troops. So at the peak of Vietnam, there was 560,000 people in country in Vietnam, and like 50,000 of them were actually engaged in combat at any one time. And that's, probably a pretty good figure. A lot of the World War I and World War II statistics are the same. It's like 10 to 1. There's 10 support people for every one person that's gonna like close with and destroy the enemy. That's the way it is.
Yeah, and I mean I would never look at a supply guy, or of course when I was in, I did it all the time. I'm like, hey Pug, don't you have some Puggy bait or whatever the stupid shit is that you say. But like I see him now, and it's like, hey man, I appreciate your service. Like, oh well, I didn't do anything like, and I'm like, hey, first of all, there is no Richter scale on pain and suffering. What makes it unique is that it's unique to the individual. You can't grade it. So like your sprained ankle when you roll your ankle playing basketball during your lunch hour, how do you know that didn't hurt as bad as my fibia and tibia coming out of my left leg? It might have.
I'm going to question you a little bit on that one, but
the point,
how the hell do we get talking about this? Hey, support people in the military. They do a great job. Then the frontline troops wouldn't be able to do anything without them. So
that's what I'm saying.
And vice versa. If the frontline troops weren't there, the support people would have no job. That's the attitude I always had. And we were a team that had to cover and move together. Yeah. And if the intel people didn't supply the intel, and if the CBs didn't build the bases and keep the generators running, and the combat engineers weren't out clearing, I mean, it's like
it takes a tribe.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's my point. It's like, listen, if you're still in and you're in a non-combat role, be proud of what you're doing.
Yeah, no doubt. I have guys that I meet now, and they say, well, I was in from, 84 to 90, and I never did anything. And I was like, hey, you did what your country asked you to do.
Yeah.
Like
stop with that mindset, man. You've been conditioned, just to call it what it is, by guys like I used to be, to believe you didn't do anything. Okay, well, the more mature me, still pretty dumb, but the more mature me is here to tell you, thank you for carrying the flag before I did.
Yeah. That's another point, is like, who was going to train you? Who's the DIs that put you through boot camp? And who's the guys that trained them in 1984, right? You know what I mean? It's like, it's a long chain.
It's a gift that keeps on giving, and but you served. You're doing more than most. Yeah. You're doing more than most. Be proud of that fact. Yeah. And so, but I remember we leave the wire for the first time in Al Asad, and so we had guys driving the 6-ton that were motor T guys that weren't our guys. Mm-hmm. So I didn't know them, and it was like I don't know if he's like a Lance Cooley, and then there was like a staff sergeant in the A driver's seat, and I'm up on the turret, right? And so I'm just like, all right, well, whatever. And so we come out of the gate, and we bang a left, and we're headed to our first checkpoint, which, by the way, the Iraqi National Guard and Iraqi police knew what our checkpoints were, when we were leaving, when we were going to get there.
So that's awesome.
Yeah, because, there's some really, really smart people in D.C. that thought that was a good idea. Yeah. And, so that, obviously, that standard operating procedure didn't last real long, because we knew it was a bad idea, but word had to get back to them, like, hey, bombs and stuff, like, just follow us everywhere we go. It's weird. It's almost like they know we're gonna be there. Imagine that, And so I remember, we took some type of contact right, and I'm lead vehicle. And the dude and the driver stops in the middle of a bridge. And I distinctly remember in training, do not stop on a bridge. And so I'm telling this dude, like, get off the bridge. And he's like looking at his staff sergeant, German saluting, like, what do I do? He's yelling at me. And so I start kicking him in his helmet, like, get off the bridge. And Staff Sergeant didn't. Staff Sergeant was like, dude, just get off the bridge.
Sounds like a good idea.
Yeah. And so it was...
aye, Captain Schick. Corporal Schick,
yeah,
aye.
Dude, we got off the bridge, and I'm like, hey, genius, how do you know that thing wasn't going to blow? Don't stop on a bridge, ever. You're Motor T. I'm just shocked that someone didn't tell you don't stop on a bridge because you're a sitting duck.
Yeah.
And it's like, that was my like welcome to Iraq moment when it was, and man, we just started, everything after that pretty much just blurs together. And until the day that we got told that we were going to go to Dulab, which was, for all intents and purposes, an ammo dump. Was pretty much what Dulab was, and that's where we were. Insurgents were going to get unexploded ordnance, and I mean thousands and thousands and thousands of RPGs, AKs, 7.62 rounds, mortars. I mean thousands. I mean, we had the combat engineers out there all day, every day, blowing stuff. I mean, they just couldn't blow it quick enough because we would find so many of these weapon caches everywhere. It was insane, and so. But we go through, we get up to the point of, I guess it's a little after a month that we're there, and we get the order that we're going to go to Dulab, which for most of us was like, okay, so we can breathe, some kickback time, relax. I had a bad feeling about it. Right in my gut. As soon as they told us, I heard Dulab, and I knew it was our turn to go and secure the perimeter of Dulab. I got a bad feeling in my gut. Didn't know what it was. And so my role was when I left the States, and I told my family, hey, listen, here's the deal. Don't send me anything. Don't write me. I'm not going to write you. Don't watch the news, and no news is good news. I'll see you in 7 months. Because in my mind, I had a job to do, and I didn't need them in my head with their first world bullshit. And because my family puts the Jerry and Springer, and so definitely didn't need that. And so that was my mindset. But we were told we're going to Dulab, and so I get this weird feeling in my gut, and I'm like, damn it, I don't know what that is. It's the night before we head out, and I get a shower and a hot shower, and I'm walking back to our tent from the shower trailer, and I walk by Gunny, and Gunny, he was a salty Gunny, man. He was like a 23-year Gunny. He earned it, and I loved him. Everybody loved him, and he was one of those guys where if you tell him good morning and he doesn't tell you, like if you don't hear something back like go F your mom, if you hear like good morning back, he's pissed about something, and it's gonna be a long day. But like if you're like go F your mom, you're like sweet, Gunny's in a good mood. He was that guy, and everybody loved him. Everybody respected him because he demanded it, and he commanded it. Because he would be the first guy, if it pops off, he's going to be right there. He's not ducking behind anything. He's the dude walking up and down the line smoking a cigar. That's that Gunny. He's that guy, and it was just an abundant amount of respect he had. And even if you hated him, you loved to hate him. But I love the dude because it was, for me, he was what the Marine Corps meant as one individual. And I dug that about him. I was like, I need to be around him all the time. I want more of what's in his head in mine. I can learn a tremendous amount from this guy. And so I'm walking back into the tent. He's in front of the tent, and I said, good evening, Gunny. And I walked by, and he didn't say anything, and he grabs like the back of my skivvy shirt and pulls me back towards him, and he hugged me. And he said, I love you, Schick. And I was like, I don't know what to do with my hands. Like, what do I do? Do I say it back? Is this a trap? What do I do? And so I was like, screw it, man. I mean, I've been dirty before. I love you too, Guns. I'll never forget, he just looked at me right in my face and just said, you're going to be all right. So roger that. So then I was like, okay, something's not right. At this point, I'm 100% convinced something's not right. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it wasn't right. So I broke my cardinal rule and went to the phone tent, called my family, and the last person I called was my dad. And, you have the 2-3 second delay. And I knew it was about 10:30 at night in Shreveport, Louisiana, and I knew he was home alone because my stepmom and my little brother were at the ranch in San Antonio, and he answers the phone. And I said, "Hey, Pop." And he knew it was me because I'm the only kid that calls him Pop. First words out of his mouth were, "Why am I talking to you?" It's almost like he knew that I knew something wasn't right. And I said, "I just wanted to tell you how much I love you and what you being my father means to me as your son." Because at this point in our life, in our journey as father and son, that's pretty much where it ended. He was my dad, I was his son. That was it. Because my older brother, he was born and God just touched his forehead and said athlete. And my dad was a baseball player, my brother's a baseball player. I always hated it. I was like, that is the slowest sport known to mankind. It's like watching paint dry. And so I always, growing up, felt like I was always chasing my brother. I was chasing this unbelievable athlete that I was never going to be better than when it came to athleticism, no matter what sport. But I was chasing that. And then I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go play baseball to try and appease my dad to show him, like, hey, I can do this too. Like, I can do, and I sucked. I was never any good at it. Football, knowing now, baseball is an art almost. It's a calculated art, whereas with football, if you can run into another human with 100% focus and 100% will of breaking that man's will by making your body collide with his as hard as you can play football. To a certain extent, right. You can play football. Well, I loved it. Because for me, it was an outlet of the aggression that I had as a kid growing up in the antithesis of the cookie cutter childhood. And so at this point that I'm leaving, my father and I, we weren't where I felt like we should be as father and son. It was just, this is a conversation that I've had with my dad since, obviously. And so when I told him, like, I just want you to know, it's important that you know how much I love and respect you and how much I owe you for being there when you were dealt a shitty hand and you had us kids on your own and you leaned in. You leaned in and you bowed up, and I owe you. Till I die, I'll owe you. And I needed you to know that. And so he said, how long is this mission? I said, 9 days. And he knew not to ask, where are you going? What are you doing? Because the people that listen to every phone call your call would be over. And he said, I want to hear from you in 9 days. He said, I better hear from you in 9 days. I said, you will, Pop. I love you, man. And he just said, I love you too. And it ended with, you better be okay. And I hung up. And it was one of those moments where I was like, at the time I'm 21 years old, and I realize I have no control over anything. Nothing. I feel like I think I can, like I think I have control in protecting my team and making sure my team's okay. I have no control over anything. It was one of those human moments where I realized I'm just as vulnerable as everyone else. There's nothing special about me. I can be the biggest, strongest, toughest. It doesn't matter. It does not matter. Because when it's your time, it's your time. That's it. Doesn't matter what you know. Doesn't matter how well trained you are. If God pulls your card, you're done. And so it was a very, very sobering and humbling moment for me. And we left out the next morning to go to Dulab. We get out to Dulab, and we start patrolling the perimeter, and if a react was called, of course, me and the react team, which me and 9 Marines, would go to wherever the react is. But I always had that heavy feeling in my gut that it didn't affect my job. It didn't affect our day-to-day operations and what we were doing, but I knew it was something was coming. And then one night we had 2 guys come in the main gate, and they were in like a white Opal. It's pulled in the main gate and pretty much just laid down on both sides of the car. Obviously not normal behavior. Well, these guys were high-profile targets that once we find out who they are and radio battalion, they're like, hey, don't let them out of your sight. And so we ended up having, and for the react team, we had two-door soft-top Humvees. That's what we had to operate in. And we had one guy in the back of one vehicle, another guy in the back of the second vehicle. They both had empty MRE boxes duct taped on their head because we were out of hoods. And so improvise, adapt, and overcome. And had them hog, just had them. They weren't going anywhere. Mm-hmm. Well, so the Iraqi National Guard also got to be on the same net frequency as us, radio frequency. So they're hearing all the transmissions. Next thing you know, they show up, and there's a lot of them, and they pull in and circle us. Obviously, a show of force, and say, these guys, same thing you went through about the IED maker, the bomb maker. These guys, they're no threat. These guys are good. You need to let them go. We're like, no. And I remember one of the guys, it was like the colonel of the Iraqi National Guard, and he said, well, you need, the interpreter's there, and I remember him saying something along the lines of, we need to take a direct order from a superior officer. And we were like, hey, bro, I don't know if you've been working with the Army or whatever. Well, we don't give a shit who you are, because we know that you're probably a bad guy. So, no. They're not leaving. And that situation got super gnarly, super quick. And I was thinking to myself, like, I remember telling one of the guys that had a 9 to one of the dude's head, and I told him if he so much as sneezes, I'll push his brains to the side of his head. And I could hear that Beretta 9mm, I could hear it rattling. Because I'm sure it was from pre-Vietnam, Marines, and I could hear the slide rattling against the barrel. And I was like, dude, that dude is shaking hard. But I knew if that dude so much as sneezed, I knew it would happen. And so we were, by the grace of God, we had, because we were part of weapons platoon, but weapons company. It just got done doing a quarter to knock or whatever they were doing, and they're listening to this transmission over the net. So we're talking with battalion, saying like, hey, this is escalating, and there's about 65 of them and 10 of us, so they were heavily outnumbered, obviously. But we need some serious shit is going to go down. Yeah. And so weapons company pulls in. I don't even remember if it's an hour later, 3 hours. It seemed like a freaking eternity. But they pull in and make a circle around the ING.
Good times.
Bro. And, of course, the weapons company are the ones with, the Mark 19s, 50 cals, AT4. We had AT4s too. But, I mean, they had all the big, when they pull in, like, okay, those guys have big stuff that obviously goes bang a lot. And so these guys pulled in, and it was almost in unison. The Iraqi National Guard guys dropping their AKs, hands in the air, no mista. And I was like, yep, those are our homies. So those guys, they take them back to Al-Assad, and, and then they popcorn fart, disappear. Just gone. I mean, I'm sure some super secret squirrel agency came in and got them or whatever. But we finally go to bed down, and I go up to the command post, and Doc was up at the command post. It was his turn to sit in the vehicle that powers the command post, and it was his turn to count the flares along Euphrates. And when was it shot, what color was it, and then we turn it into intel, and then they try and crack a code, decipher code. And so we was talking to Doc and telling him, like, like, hey, man, this was... No, he's like, I know, I was listening to it on the net. That was crazy. And so I can barely keep my eyes open at this point. Drilling's worn off. And as you know, series of high highs, series of low lows, no gray area. That's what being a grunt is, and being a warfighter is.